Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live stream on Made by Folk. Tonight we've got another little experiment. We're going to try and do something with a little bit more structure, and we've got two very talented designers to talk to us about drinks packaging. So today, Adrian and Steven are from D8 in Glasgow are joining us, and we're going to go through a couple of different projects that they've worked on in the past. And I think, these are just like great projects in general. So actually hearing from the designers that were working on them, I think is going to be really interesting to you guys. So I'll get them on, and then we'll do a little introduction and say hello. So let's get everybody online here. Steven, Adrian, do you want to wave and say hi? See that can also hear you both?
Hello.
Hi.
Nice, perfect. That seemed to work very well the first time. So yeah, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to me tonight. I know it's always it's quite late, and I know that you guys probably also had a stressful day, so I do very much appreciate it. And like when I talked to you guys last week, I think we quickly came up with, well, first of all, we want to have a whiskey while we're talking. So what better way than actually talk about the packaging of some of the whiskey brands that you have worked on in the past, and then we can have a wee drink later on as well. I thought that was like a really great idea. I think Adrian came up with that one.
All right, then. Yeah.
Or any excuse, I guess. So as I just mentioned, you know, we went through a couple of projects that you guys had talked about in the past, and I think we sort of narrowed it down to something a little bit more traditional, something a little bit more modern, and then something very extravagant. And I think you guys have already prepared a little presentation for this as well, to actually show some visuals while we're talking about this, which I'm very excited to see. But maybe as a little introduction, you guys can just say hi and tell us just quickly, you know, a little bit about yourself and your work at D8. Who would like to start?
Give it to H.
Age before beauty. Okay. Well, so we're D8, based in Glasgow predominantly. We actually opened our Amsterdam studio yesterday, which I think we're going to talk a wee bit about later on, which we're thrilled about. We started the company, myself and my business partner, James, in 1999. So studio's been running for almost 22 years now. We started off as a kind of traditional graphic design consultancy. So, the internet didn't exist back then, or it did, but you would dial in, twice a day to see if you'd get any emails. So it was a different world, but you could go out and you could meet people. So in actual real life, so it was a very different world. And so started out, the usual sort of logos, posters, leaflets, flyers, and then over the years it just kind of changed into pretty much full service. We do a lot of drinks packaging, which we're going to talk about. We do a lot of brand identity work. We've got a digital team, so we do both front and back end websites. We do a lot of kind of illustration, typographic illustration as well, and we do a lot of kind of motion and animation work. And we've started kind of doing film work now as well. Real kind of diverse range of clients. We've been one of the BBC's rostered agencies for over a decade now, so we've worked with them on all sorts of projects, through to kind of work with Edrington, Remy Cointreau, Beam Suntory, and a lot of independent kind of distillers with whiskey and spirits brands. We do work with Tennent's Lager in Glasgow, which we're really pleased about. It's a favourite of ours. Magners. And a whole host of other people. So Glasgow School of Art. We've been doing work with the Holocaust Museum in America, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. We'll get some really nice work coming out with them, and hopefully in the next month or so, we'll start to share that. And the type of work we do is really diverse. So it's good. There's I think there's 55 or 56 of us now.
Yeah.
Started off as 3. So it's grown to a size where, I think it's a good size, because we're kind of, we're big enough to deliver pretty much anything we're asked to do, but at the same time we're small enough that we know everybody's name and what everybody's up to, it's still an independent studio, and it's got that kind of ethos, and it feels that way. So yeah, no, it's good. And I think when the pandemic kind of hit at first, the first lockdown, there was that kind of pause for 3 weeks where everybody sort of held their breath, and there was quite a few projects went on hold and stuff, and we were like, geez, what's going to happen? And then after that, it just kind of picked up, and it's kind of gone like a steam train since then. So we've been busy, we've been working away, but we're just like everyone else, we're just doing it from home, and kind of dealing with the challenges that come with that, really.
Yeah, totally. Well, Stephen, when did you join D8?
I joined, I think it's coming on about 6 years ago now. Previously to that, I'd been I actually started an agency around about the same time as Adrian, but mine failed miserably. So I ended up working for myself for years. Actually, I kind of worked in this room actually for about 6 or 7 years. Then I moved over to the States, where I went to work for Goodby Silverstein and Partners, who are sort of the Got Milk guys, the advertising company. So I went and worked for those guys. Then I moved over to Stranger and Stranger when I was over there as well, and got really homesick, decided to come home, happened to be having a conversation with Adrian about it, and he sort of graciously offered me a role with D8, and I've been there ever since.
Awesome.
Stephen is the only person who would move back from San Francisco to Scotland. Because I think
they were too happy.
They were too happy, and the weather was too good.
It's good.
I've never seen so many smiles in my life. It just grated on me. Too many teeth. Man.
All right. Well, thanks for the intro. All right. So I think we've got our 3 projects lined up. Who's taking the first one? I think, Stephen, you were going to talk to us about the sort of more traditional packaging design first of all, didn't we?
Yeah, I can pick up on that one.
Nice one. Okay, well, I'll switch to our presentation view and see if this works as well as I hope. It does. Nice. So yeah, everybody can hopefully see your screen now. And Stephen, you can take it away.
See if I can see the screen now. Hold on. There we go. Yeah, I mean, feel free to jump in at any point with any sort of questions or interjections or anything at all. But this one obviously is for Benromach, who are a Gordon and MacPhail owned brand. And they've got a kind of small distillery up in Forres, just outside Elgin. And it's really kind of, it's a really well-loved, it's a small brand, but it's quite a well-loved brand. And the people who buy it absolutely buy into it, and they love the smoky, kind of subtle character that it's got. Mm-hmm. So they'd kind of come to us looking for a rebrand on it, mainly because although those same people absolutely loved it, it was it's a reasonably small group in terms of, it's not up there with the Glenlivets or the Glenfiddich, those massive numbers. So they kind of really wanted to grow this brand outside of the current kind of lovers that they had. And I think a lot of it was trying to appeal to markets outside the UK as well. So one of the major ones they spoke about was perhaps trying to get into the US and then also into the Asian market as well. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we found, and if Adrian can sort of slip onto the next slide there, one of the things that we found was that the type that they were working with was essentially, if you didn't know the brand, it was fairly unreadable. Mm-hmm. So, if you can imagine that being on a gantry at 12, 13, 14 feet away, if you don't know who the brand is, it's very, very difficult to ask for it.
Yeah.
And interestingly, one of the things in the brief was they did say, "We love our logo, don't change our logo." So when Adrian and I went in, the first thing we kind of did was say, "Look, we're going to change your logo, but bear with us." So we had to kind of go in and explain to them exactly why we wanted to do that. So if we go to the next slide, what we'd found was when we were going through the archive and we were going through the kind of the vintage imagery that was a part of the brand, we found they used to have this sort of pagoda style roof, and on that roof, just someone local had just went on and painted Benromach on it. And I loved this. I absolutely adored it. I just thought it was a real gift. And when you looked at the current bottling that they had and the heritage that the brand actually had, there was just no whiff of it at all. There was nothing there to hark back to the history of it. It was almost like it was trying to go for a more modern approach. But for me, in that modern approach, it kind of failed in conveying who they'd been. And I think when you've got brands that, or certainly a distillery that was 1898, so it's well over 100 years old, you kind of want to honour some of that heritage that they've got. So we took that sign writing from the roof and we redrew it, just adding in a little sort of drop shadow just to make it slightly more interesting. And we ended up, through various bits and bobs, we did some animation, and we did a variety of different iterations of the logo as well. So, you go through the usual check boxes that you just make sure that it's going to work in any situation at any given time. But this was kind of one of the main lockup that we had. And another thing we wanted to do was really kind of ram home the idea that one of their USPs as a business is that they exclusively use first fill casks. Now, this is quite important from a flavour point of view when it comes to whiskey, because the more you use a cask, or the more second uses it gets, the less character that it's going to impart in the liquid. So by using these first fill casks, they can kind of guarantee that they're giving the liquid the best chance it can possibly have to become, a really, really good whiskey. Amazing.
And that's actually not a common technique anymore?
No one that seems to shout too much about it anyway. I think one of the things that they have in their favour is being a small distillery.
Yeah.
They're not having to go out and source casks willy-nilly. They don't have to just get whatever they can get their hands on at the time. They can be quite selective in what they're getting. And I know a lot of other distilleries are doing exactly the same thing in terms of being as quality-driven in their wood policy as possible. But this commitment to a first fill cask only kind of policy, I think is quite rare. It's something that certainly in Speyside distilleries, from what I can gather, is quite rare. So to us, it's the kind of thing that you should absolutely be putting to the forefront of your communications,
Yeah.
Okay, so if we move on. So taking that logo type, it just kind of made sense to me as well that rather than stopping there, we could actually start to expand this. And when we did the original presentation for it, we'd done things like the age statements were all done in a very similar style. But as we went forward, it kind of became clear that I think from a general communications point of view, we could actually start to build a brand around this typeface. And with it being a sort of hand-painted piece of lettering in the first place, I really wanted to honour that as well. So we worked with a company called PsyOps out in San Francisco, who I'd worked with previously, and they helped us kind of realise this typeface. So we have a full set of uppercase, lowercase. We've got alternate lowercase as well. In fact, we've actually got 2 alternate lowercases on it. We've got a full set of numerals, full set of punctuation, and a full language supported set as well. But what we really wanted to do was to try and retain as much as possible of that kind of sign writing idea. We made sure that every single character has a duplicate, and that duplicate just acts as something that throws up a slightly different proportion, a slightly different width. Some of the legs are slightly thinner, some are slightly thicker. And what it does is, as you start to set your type, it starts to feel a little bit more organic, and it starts to feel a little bit more natural, as if a sign writer had actually done it. So it's just built into the open type functionality that, if the same letter is in the same word twice, then it just gets swapped out. And
that's a great little detail.
We just managed to keep that organic kind of natural look all the way through.
Yeah, nice.
So if we move on, so you can just see how that kind of starts to work. It is a traditional whiskey, but it's also forward-facing. So what we're trying to do is to take that typeface and really make it the linchpin of everything that we're doing, so that it begins to become known for this big, bold typographic statement. And that's something that we can then take onto the glass itself. So the glass, when we designed it, again, if we just sort of go back to the idea of it being something that they want to take to other markets, we started to think, well, actually, if we're going to try and sell this into the States, for example, let's make it easy for them. So we looked at all the different kind of Speyside malts that were on shelves, and by sort of extension, lots and lots of sort of just single malt whiskies in general. But with this distillery being very much handmade, small, handcrafted, almost artisanal, if you like, there's no buttons, there's no dials, there's nothing in that distillery that gets run by a computer. It's all guys looking at their watch and saying, well, actually, it's time to switch this lever and that'll let something in, and we'll do it that way. So it's very much handmade. So we wanted to kind of almost treat the glass in a bourbon-like way so that it starts to become quite familiar to the American drinker. But then even going from there, we wanted to take that typeface, put that onto the glass for a couple of reasons. Firstly, that when you turn it around, you've got this big, sort of bold Benromach distillery type, but it also improves the hand feel, it improves the grip. So if someone behind the bar is pouring it, there's less chance of it slipping out of their hand, which is always a bonus. So there was a number of reasons for the way we did things. You know, the smaller, stouter bottle, I think, gives it more of a robust kind of craft-led feel as well.
Definitely.
You know, all the debosses that we had all the way around were just there so we could house the logo in a really, not the logo, sorry, the label in a comfortable way, so that the glass doesn't just become a vessel for a label to be stuck on. It just, the whole thing becomes part of the overall package.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to support that, we started to introduce a number of marks. Now, one of the big things that Keith Cruikshank, who's the master distiller up there, he often says that Benromach is made of 4 ingredients. So it's barley, water, yeast, and the people who make it. Because there's no dials, there's no buttons, there's no computers, it's all about the expertise of the people who work there. And we kind of wanted to honour that just in the fact that, you know, I think if that's their ethos and that's something that they really cling on to, let's make that something that we show on every single pack. So we created a number of variants, of this, what we call the ingredients seal. And you can see how that starts to work. So on some packs, it's the roundel, then some packs we reverse it, on some packs we just use the diamond element. But on every pack, you'll find this seal just as a stamp of quality or a stamp of authenticity, if you like.
Yeah, that turned out great. I love the pattern.
Yeah, it works really, really well. We've actually yet to use it on pack, but I'll get there. I'll find a place for it. And then as part of that as well, you know, just to kind of visualise things like tasting notes and visualise the distillery itself, we created a whole sort of suite of illustrations. In this case, I think to offset the more modern kind of aspects that we were doing with the typography, we wanted to go slightly more traditional. So we did a slightly cleaner version of it, but we looked to, you know, traditional engraving, traditional etching, and just saw, well, actually, how can we start to show these tasting notes in that way? And there was a whole suite of these done, which you can see on their website. Actually, when we're talking about individual whiskies, we can say, well, this one's sweet, this one's more bitter, this one's got a lot more smoke in it, and it just helps the user or the consumer get a sense of what it is they're actually going to be buying. I think if we move on there again. Yeah, so you can just see how it starts to work on pack. What I quite like to do every time I'm doing one of these jobs is I like to look at it as a toolkit. Same as you would with any other brand, you know, let's find what these graphic assets are, what makes up this graphic identity, and then how do we apply that? And on pack, one of the reasons I love packaging actually is just the fact that you can take all these different disciplines within design and combine them into one place. So you can take your typography, you can take your traditional layout skills, you can take your illustration, you've got lots of print expertise to work with. And it's just a really nice place to bring all of those little disciplines together. So for me, you know, you can see how we use the typography, we start to use that really simple color palette. And you can see how these little seals start to worm their way into the layout, just to sort of give you extra premium cues and extra authenticity to the whole thing.
I think that's kind of something, what you just said there, I hadn't really thought about it like that, but I guess, you know, packaging is one of the last kind of forms of print that's commonly used, I guess. Yeah. And, you know, I know that, you know, when you start out in design, or certainly when I started out in design, you know, it was always about I wanted to do kind of brochure work, really nice print finishing and stuff like that, or book work or whatever, you know. And I think when you get into the whiskey packaging, which it's not the easiest kind of discipline in the world to get into, because they want you to have experience of doing it before they'll give you a job doing it. but in order to get the experience, you have to do the job. But so it's getting your first kind of whiskey packaging job is the hardest one, I think, to get, and then after that, once you're in, you're in. But you do get to work with like lots of foils and bosses, loads of stuff, and and now the game's changing again because sustainability's like becoming massive. So that's something that we're having to factor into kind of everything that we look at, and that's becoming a big part of the conversation as well now. So it's interesting, but I think Stephen's right. It's nice stuff to be involved in working on.
Oh, it's an absolute playground. If you're a designer, it's an absolute playground. The fact, like Adrian says, when I started as well, the dream was to get annual reports, of which I never got one, but there you go. But, it was always about trying to get some kind of job that you could play with the finishes on, because really there's nothing better than picking something up. And, even in this day, you've got the digital side, which is great, but there's nothing better as a designer than walking into a store or walking into a supermarket and picking something off the shelf and, running your fingers over the varnishes or the embossings. It's fantastic. It never ever gets old. So, we're very, very lucky to do what we do.
Definitely. Nice one. Oh, sorry, I thought that was the last image.
No.
More to go.
So we took this over the full core range initially. The colour scheme for everything was taken directly from the distillery itself. So if you ever see the place, it's a whitewashed, just a series of bleached whitewashed buildings, all with shots of red all over the place. So all the windows are painted this bright sequoia red. The chimney is painted the same colour. And it is very much a minimal colour palette up there. So we built the whole thing around this black, white, red palette with shots of copper, just to denote the copper stills that were up there as well. So very, very simple for that initial core range. And as we've moved on, we've done a load of single casks. We've done their organic. We've done peat smoke as well. We've done this 21 years old, which is kind of the top end of the core range. So this one, just to kind of mix things up and increase the value or the perceived value in it, you just change things up ever so slightly. So the age statement becomes gold. The ingredients seal actually is built out of a metal, a die-cast metal plaque, which goes on the front of the box. And it's just it's using the same elements, but just elevating them every single time.
Yeah.
So we're currently just working on the sort of real top-end ranges just now. So what are the luxury ranges going to become? What are those going to look like? And exactly the same. It's actually, at that point, it becomes more reductive, but it is very much saying, how do you take that toolkit and just elevate it even more?
Yeah. So maybe just a technical question on in terms of time. You were saying you're doing like multiple projects with them on their premium range, but so like throughout the year, would you work with Benromach on multiple bottles then, or is it sort of you do one bottle, get that kind of to print, and then get on to the next? Is this like
well, I think the first year, I would say we did 4, 5, probably 7 bottles the first year there.
Oh wow!
And I think we've got another 3 or 4 upcoming.
Huh.
But it just depends on what they want to do. I mean, they look at their numbers. A lot of the time, it's actually just, the master distiller will look at things and say, actually, I've got a lovely cask over here, but I think if I marry it with this, I can do something really nice with it. So, what could we do? So, I mean, we're still in the sort of the early stages of this relationship anyway. It's been a couple of years from start to finish now, but, in whiskey terms, that's actually...
I guess.
We're just toddlers here. So there's much more to come.
Great.
I suppose with that, talking about the kind of expensive end of it, the luxury end of it, probably segues nicely into this one that I'm going to talk about. So this is, I think, it was a while ago that we did this. It might have been about 5 years ago or something like that. But I think at the time when this was released, this was £14,000 a bottle. And I believe that one has just sold at auction for $75,000. Wow. So, it's quite something. There was only 159 of them. So this is Black Bowmore, and this is the kind of 5th and final release of the Black Bowmore kind of liquid that Bowmore had. We had at the time, as Stephen was saying with Benromach, when we came to work on this project, we'd just done the full rebrand of Bowmore. So all of the bottles, their identity, absolutely everything. It was a massive project. I think it was about 1.5 to 2 years of my life, actually. Bowmore, all in, it was huge. And so this was the one at the kind of top end of the family, I guess. And they gave us the brief for it, which was amazing because these things they're that scarce that you don't generally get the chance to work on projects like these. So to get asked to look at this was a real privilege. But at the same time, you then, once you've been given the brief and you calm down, you think, Christ, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to do, I need to do this justice. What on earth am I going to do? But luckily, it was a great project to work on, and I think the client kind of pushed us all the way, but at the same time, they really let us take it to the kind of nth degree, in terms of what we looked at. So everything was custom made. So the cabinet was made by a guy called John Galvin, who he might actually be logged in listening to this just now, so I better watch what I say about him. But John's a master craftsman. He makes beautiful furniture, and really, really beautiful high end stuff. And he does a lot of kind of one-off bespoke whiskey projects and kind of very kind of high end whiskey cabinets and things like that. I mean, his client list's pretty stellar. So I've known John before then anyway, and always wanted the chance to work with him. So we worked with John. Each of the cabinets was handmade. I'll kind of talk a little bit more about the detail of those. But that little kind of silver tray with a piece of wood that's recessed in against the black, the brown wood is actually a little piece of the cask that's held in a silver tray, and that's inlaid into these handmade cabinets. And then the word mark Bowmore and the established date and all the the 1964 date, everything there, that's a thing called a customs transfer, which they're made in Germany, but it's basically like really kind of sliver thin kind of metal that gets laser cut to to absolute perfection, and it just gets kind of applied on like a really kind of fine transfer. And the skill involved in actually putting that on and not messing it up and getting it in the right position is quite something. I mean, John told me at the time when he was making these. I'll kind of show you a wee bit more about. Actually, I'll talk more about the process of making the cabinet in a second. This was the other guy that we worked with, a guy called Brodie Nairn. So he's got a company called Glasstorm up in Tain, and they hand blew each of the bottles. So I think there was 159 of them. So each of the bottles were hand blown, hand etched, and then hand tipped with silver ink that you can see there. So all of that stuff was done by hand. I mean, it really was like, it was an amazing project. And I don't know how many bottles they actually, went through to get the 159. Because
I was going to ask, there must have been some breakages along the way. I mean, I wonder how much.
You get breakages, you get imperfections in the glass, so it's, I guess that's where his skill comes in, because he's like, a master craftsman, but I know he didn't just make 159 of them. I know that there were more of them made, but
wow.
So this was the collar that we had made for it, and the collar's made of 5 metal pieces. So you can see it's 5 metal rings, and they each represented like a decade of the liquid's life in cask, and then it was blind engraved. So each one was hand engraved again with the bottle kind of edition number on it. So at that point you're going to your client, you're saying, right, we're going to do this neck collar. 5 metal rings, 2 of them are sterling silver. We're going to, and they're just going, yep, great, let's do it. I mean, it's you don't often get projects like that. Can you do anything else? Well,
At any point, did you come up with anything that was so extravagant that they said, "Yeah, I mean, come on, Adrian, you're taking it a little bit too far now"?
I don't know if we did actually. I honestly don't know if we did. I'm trying to think because it did get fairly insane, like in terms of the level of finish. So this was this is where the cabinet's open. So you'll see that pattern that's sitting in behind the bottle, and again that bottle's holding one of the pieces of the cask, in that little tray, and then the bottle's hand etched, as we've said, But we put this pattern together. So because there'd been 5 releases, so in 1964 the liquid went into cask, and then every line in space represents a year of the liquid's life in the number 1 vaults where it was matured, right? So John carved those were all carved, and then for each release date, each of the lines was then inlaid with silver wire. So, and what he had to do was, like, he would carve he would make the cabinet interiors, make the doors. They would all be engraved, and then what he would do is he would take that silver wire, and it's all hammered in by hand. And if he kind of got to the end of one part of it and chipped the door, because the doors are stained that black colour, that it's like, it starts out life as wood, and then it's stained with this kind of insane stain thing. And if he chipped that and damaged the wood so you could see through it underneath, or just damaged the wood, he would have to start the whole thing again. And he also had to do it in a way that when he inlaid that silver wire, that it met perfectly. Where as you took it round, almost if you imagine it like a circle, it had to join perfectly. So I have no idea how he did it, but his patience along with me, where I'm going, right, John, I'd like to do this, and then he's saying, okay, well, I think we should do this with it. And he was, the two of us were as bad as each other, because we just started pushing each other with different ideas and seeing what we could come up with. So I had the idea of the pattern and inlaying it with the silver, and then he came back to us with this, which was what we did. So that little silver pool that you can see on the left hand side, he was like, I can put a hidden compartment in behind the actual bottle. So we that little pool, you pull that out, it's held with magnets top and bottom, and when it comes out, it reveals that when you flip it over, it's the miniature of it. So we put a miniature of the liquid in behind it. Now then we get Brodie in the act. We were like, right, we want to put a miniature in, and Brodie's going, well, I'll hand blow the miniature, so that the sample file. And what I'll do is I'll hand engrave the story round it in a spiral. And then what we'll do is we'll tie it with a Japanese knot, and we'll dip it in wax so that it's so that it's sealed. And it just, like, the threes just started playing off with each other. And every time we would go back to the client and we want to do this, they would be like, yep, great, we want, because they really, I think with this one, the original Black Bowmore was, I think, the one that started the kind of trend in luxury whiskey, and whiskey's selling at auction for crazy amounts. So they really wanted to kind of go to town with this. So, they were happy to indulge us. So that was great. And then just to top it off, so we had to put some information about the actual liquid, put the story inside it. So what we did was we got these silver plates which were acid etched with the story, and then they were hidden inside the interior of the cabinet with like magnets that held it inside. So it was like a kind of another kind of concealed thing to it. I mean, it was like the James Bond whiskey projects or something like that. It was great. The level of detail that we got to work to was just fantastic. It was a brilliant project. And when that went live, it led to loads more whiskey work. Lots of people got in touch with us off the back of doing that, and it kind of it got us in about a lot of other brands and things like that. So it was a great project. Yeah, so that's it there, shot against a white background, kind of looking all kind of minimal and a bit sexy. So I mean, it's, as I say, and the liquid really is that colour. I mean, I was actually what was quite nice about it as well was, like, so I went over to Islay to make a film about the making of the cabinet and the release of this, and I had to do some filming over at the distillery. And while I was over there, there was a guy called Eddie McArthur, and he was the what was he? can't remember what his job title was at the time, but he was about to retire from Bowmore, and he'd been there for, I think, just short of 50 years. So when he arrived at the distillery, the cask, that cask had actually just gone into the vaults like the year before he arrived, and then he got to watch it throughout the course of its life, until they bottled it. And the other guy was the distillery manager that we dealt with, David Turner, and he was telling me that it was like his dad or his grandfather had actually rolled that very cask into the distillery. So because it's all generations of families that work in these places, and it was amazing. But we got to go over when they launched it. They did a dinner for kind of whiskey kind of writers and people like that, and they took us over for it, and we got to actually sample it, and it was amazing.
No way.
I mean, it was fantastic. If I could drink only that, I would. But it's in rather short supply.
Oh man!
So,
what a rare treat,
fantastic.
though. Yeah.
No, I do think we are like we're really lucky with a lot of the projects that we get to work on, and we feel really privileged with a lot of the stuff that we get to do. I think we work really hard, but I'm sure there are loads of people out there who work really hard as well. But we do appreciate it, it's as we know we get to work on projects like these that they don't come up every day, so they're a bit special.
Yeah, so, I wonder, like, do you think does this sort of
an expectation now when you get to that kind of end, like if you're doing a 50-year-old release, that you're going to have to do something pretty special with the packaging, and that you're going to have to do something that elevates the release and kind of acts as a halo for the rest of the expressions in the brand. Because I guess the thing is that if you've got this, and this is like one of the kind of it's absolute kind of whiskey royalty. If you've got a bottle of the 12-year-old, chances are it's been matured in the same warehouse, under the same conditions. So there's the lineage there. It's just that not all casks are going to, they're not going to age to 50 years, and some of them will kind of. You can't just put the liquid in a cask and hope that it will, leave it for 50 years and you get that. It's it's just weird things happen in certain casks where it works and these things happen. But I think there's certainly across most whiskey brands, when you get into the kind of higher end stuff now, the kind of packaging and the storytelling and all these things are expected, when you're working on them,
Yeah, of course.
It's a nice one to do.
Damn right. Dream job.
Oh, it's a legacy job, that one. It really is. It's a legacy project, I just can't help wondering if John did have accidents with any of those cabinets. What's holding his CDs in his house now? Is he just has he just got the best looking CD cabinets in the world?
Well, yeah, I would imagine that he does.
made a wee lunchbox out of one of them.
Exactly.
He's got a few old pairs of Stan Smiths in there.
I just moving on.
Moving on. So, we have gone way over time already. So I'm just gonna say, like, let's just keep going and stay on YouTube for now, because it's been super interesting, and I saw no point to cut you off at any of that, because there's some great stories coming out. So yeah, third project, something a little bit more modern, a gin brand for Severn Crofts.
Yeah, I'll try and keep. I know we're way over time, so I'll try and keep this one as.
Even if we can do like maybe 15 minutes or so on Instagram, or like we could try. We can always go over time as well, depending on if you guys have anything planned after this. But let's get into this project first.
Okay. Right. Well, the Highland Liquor Co are a kind of small, privately owned distillery up in Ullapool, up in the northwest of Scotland, and. When the guy came to us, he was very keen on doing something that was of the land, and I think the gin itself, I've tried it many times, and it's one of those ones that's a really robust, strong, uncompromising liquid for a gin. It doesn't apologise. It doesn't try and be light. It doesn't try and be fresh. It's just a strong, sort of nailed down traditional gin. And I think it's really quite reflective of the land, where it's a beautiful place, but it's uncompromising, So I think he wanted to do a similar sort of idea where the contents have that kind of uncompromising, strong kind of finish, but what was going to hold it was reflective of the beauty of the land itself. So we took kind of these shots that Adrian just went through there, we took a lot of those as inspiration from the place itself. And that kind of led us to just look at this very kind of simple mark for the Highland Liquor Company itself. So it was all about the marriage of the land to the sea. So we created these kind of really simple lines, simple geometry, just to kind of be reflective of what was going on there. So you've got obviously the mountains at the top. We've got the kind of croft land, I guess, on the middle, and that just kind of leads us into the sea. Just, we encapsulate the whole thing in a square just to go, it's all part of the same whole. It all forms the same feel for the place. So we took that sort of idea as we went forward, and everything that we did for this brand was to be reflective of that land, that space, that water. Everything had to kind of be reflective of it. So when we looked at the glass, the glass was ridged to be reminiscent of, the rolling hills and, even just ripples in the water, and everything was supposed to feel of its place. Even when you look at the paper there, the texture of the paper was chosen to be reflective of, if you walk into a field that's been mown or worked on by the farmer, and you'll see the kind of the lines and the patterns that you start to get through I want to say hay, but I'm not entirely, wheat fields. You get those kind of lovely diagonal shapes. So we found a paper called Savile Row by Fedrigoni, which it's reminiscent of tweed, but for us it really felt like it was quite appropriate for what we were trying to say about the land and those sort of shapes that were coming out of the fields. Similarly, if we just move on there, sorry. So similarly, the mark that we had for Seven Crofts itself, the idea was to take this geometry that we had for the main parent company logo and start to build a system around that. So we built this idea of Seven Crofts represented by 7 diagonal lines, each one representing a field. Basically, the whole idea was that Seven Crofts is named after the birth of Ullapool, in which the town itself was formed around 7 initial crofts or dwellings, each one inhabited by a craftsman. So we had people who built ropes, people who built boats, people who were fishermen by trade, people who were farmers by trade, and these guys all came together and formed what is now the town of Ullapool. So that was kind of the original idea for both the name and how that little icon would come about. And you can see how even in this glass here, we wanted to take the idea of the land meeting the sea. So to talk about a traditional gin, you would often think of this green bottle or something like that, but we wanted to bring it into the sea idea. So using this sort of ombre effect coming down the bottle, we just tried out, God knows how many sprays we tried out in this bottle just to get it the right one. But we went through tons and tons of different colours just to try and get exactly what would represent that land moving into the purity of the water kind of thing. And then moving on. So again, we can, once we get these things, we start to sort of draw them out into advertising images as well, or campaign imagery. But the next product in the line was the fisherman's strength of Seven Crofts. So rather than a navy strength, with it being a fishing town, it just seemed more apt to call it fisherman's strength. So this one comes in at a hefty 57% volume. And with it being fishermen, we decided, well, actually, this icon should now change and it should become about 7 fish that are then sort of wrapped around in this sort of tessellated way and just surrounded by the water. And again, just to tie things in, the idea right from the start of the ombre effect was for each release, we'll change that colour. And for us, fisherman's strength, it just made absolute sense to go to the blue, which we're talking about, the deep blue of the surrounding ocean.
We should probably actually give Susan Castillo a mention here for these these images, which are beautiful. I know, I saw Susan liked the fact we were doing this talk on Instagram, so I don't know if she's she's watching. But if she is, then there you go. They're lovely. Should also mention Blair at Render Studio, who did a load of the renders on Benromach. Some of that stuff was renders. And Richard Mountney, who did the photography on Blackpool. There you go. My conscience is clear.
Well done. Yeah.
I've given everything I mentioned.
I mean, I should probably note with Susan as well, with the first images that you saw there, with the bottle kind of up against that sort of stacked up landscape. Susan actually builds all that stuff as well. So, she's incredible at set making and prop making as well. So it's, it's great to work with. Fantastic.
Yeah, they turned out great.
Yeah.
Oh. And that's the last slide. We were going to talk
nice.
About Amsterdam, but we can do that on Instagram if you want instead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely went a little longer than I expected, but that was so interesting. I think it's definitely something that I'd love to do more of, this kind of format, because you guys mentioned so many little details that I've seen a lot of these photos, loads of times, because we shared each one of those projects throughout the years on our channels. But looking at it with through your eyes is very different. You pick up on a lot of the paper in the Seven Crofts bottle. It's something that I noticed that it had a texture, but I didn't really pick up that the texture almost perfectly matches that original identity that you designed as well. So that was a really nice touch.
Should I escape this then, Glenn? Is that what?
So we keep it up there for now. What I was just going to remind everybody else, so the original plan, and I think we'll stick with it, is that we're going to leave this here so that this is like a full finished presentation, and we're going to head over to Instagram Live for like a Ask Me Anything. So if you guys do have any questions, I will make a note of the 2 questions that have been asked here already, and I will ask them just so that they're saved in our Instagram stories. And we can, depending on how much time you guys have, we can spend like maybe 20-30 minutes going through any questions that might be open. I certainly have a few. And cool. and have a wee whiskey.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go and get one from behind. That's what I'm going to do.
Just spin round to the bar.
All right, you two. Well, I will say goodbye to everybody and thank everybody, the sort of 30, 40 in the end. I think we had 46 at one time who joined us live. I'm sure lots of people join us on Instagram as well from that channel. Adrian, Steven, thank you very much for taking the time so far.
Thank you.
And I'll see you guys on the other side.
Do we...